Hello, I'm John Jenkins and this is CFO Central. Each week we will take a question from the community and we'll unpack that in relation to accounting, tax and software. If there's something that's been bothering you within your business and you'd like to get in touch, please let us know and we'll try and unpack that for you next week.
Okay, here is my money question. Say I have a friend and that friend went out and spent £100 in a restaurant with a client and they forgot to get a receipt and they forgot to put that receipt through Xero. Say I have a friend that did that. What are the repercussions of when it comes to reconciling? There's no paperwork.
Okay, so let's just pick through Mark's question here for a few seconds to make sure that we're going to go at this in the right direction. The key things for me that I've picked out from this are we've taken out a client. Okay, so immediately client entertainment, not staff entertainment, because the rules are different. We've lost the receipt. So what are the rules around lost receipts? You can't scan it into Xero because you don't have it, but are you allowed to claim for it? What should you be aware of? And then thirdly and lastly, how do you reconcile that in Xero? This thing's going to appear on your bank feed, but what are you going to do with it when it comes in on your bank feed? Okay, can you even process it as a bona fide business expense? So those are the things that immediately spring to mind for me. So let's look at lost receipt for a second. You have a legal requirement as a business owner to keep proper records and books for tax purposes. You can't claim something if you can't prove that it was a bona fide business expense. There is no upper limit on what can be claimed without a receipt. So ultimately, if you're claiming stuff and you don't have backup documents for it, it's not to say that you can't claim for it through the business, but you need to be aware that HMRC could legitimately, if they looked into your records, decide that that's not a business expense because you have no evidence to prove that it is. If you've got a receipt that's got sorry, you don't have a receipt, but if you had an expense that normally would have VAT applicable to it, maybe you've bought something from McDonald's and the printer was broken. If you've got previous receipts and you know that it's vatable, you can still claim the VAT on those receipts up to the value of £25, even if you don't have the receipt. Okay, but you would need to know that that supplier of those goods is VAT registered in order to be able to claim that and know that that is something you can do. All of this is evidence for HMRC. Okay, anything that you can put together story-wise. So just make sure if you have lost receipts that you do know what those costs relate to, because you've got to keep records for 6 years and you're not going to remember what that one expense from 2019 related to unless you document it somehow. You are not alone. 65% of senior management admit to losing receipts. Okay, we all do it. I went on a business trip last week. I didn't lose a receipt, but I forgot to ask for one. It happens. It doesn't mean that you're doing things untowards or trying to put costs through the business that don't relate to the business. We all have these, lapses of concentration. Just because a cost has gone out of your bank statement does not prove that it is a receipt for tax purposes. Prime example, you buy something from Amazon, okay? It goes through your bank account, it's £150, it's the week before Christmas. Just because you've paid for it out of the business bank account and it says Amazon on your bank account, it doesn't prove that that was a bona fide business cost, okay? It could be a Christmas present for somebody. Without having the backup document for it, you've got no way of proving that it was a business expense. And lastly, and probably most important, your accountant or bookkeeper are not HMRC. They are not the police. It's not their job to tell you that you can or cannot claim for certain things. Okay, they have professional ethics and guidelines that they need to adhere to. Dictating to you that you're a liar because you're missing a receipt for something might not be the best way to enhance client relationships. So if you're working with someone who's been a bit kind of dictatorial in terms of what paperwork you need and what you can and cannot claim for, I would just urge you to politely remind them that ultimately you are the one that's responsible for this stuff, not them. you're happy that it is a business expense, and therefore you are more than happy to put that through and deal with any consequences. So I just touched on this a second ago. Staff expenses are different to client and business entertainment. Okay, the rules are different, so let's not get these confused. In this respect, we've taken out a client. It's not a member of staff that we're talking about. So general rule of thumb, as with anything in tax and accounting, there are exceptions to the rules. Okay, so I'm just going to stick to a basic concept here. This is a limited company, it's VAT registered, it's an owner managed business, there's only one person in it, and we know they've taken out a client. Okay, generally you would not be able to recover any VAT on that business entertainment. Good news for us, because we've lost the receipt anyway, so in that respect we wouldn't be able to claim any VAT even if we did have the receipt. Secondly, business entertainment is not allowable for deduction against profit. So we're a limited company. In terms of corporation tax, this will get added back. So again, whilst we've lost the receipt and we don't even have the paperwork, if we've made £1,000 profit after that £100 is being posted, it would get added back on the tax comp. So we would pay corporation tax on £1,100 profit, i.e. the 1,000 plus the 100 that gets added back on. Okay, so you're not winning by putting this expense through the business. You can't claim any VAT, and it's not offsetable against your profits that you pay tax on. Fortunately though, business entertainment is largely not considered a taxable benefit in kind for employees, so you're not going to pay any personal tax for the fact that you've taken this client out for entertainment. Again, there are exceptions that apply to these rules. Again, it is different for staff entertainment as well, so just make sure that you define the line between those two concepts. Okay, so now we've established the facts that if you've lost a receipt, it's okay to process that in Xero, and ultimately what to do with VAT and what to do with corporation tax. So you see, I'm in the demo company here in Xero. I recommend, if you are going to mess around with stuff in Xero, do it in the demo company, not in your live company. So to answer Mark's question about what does he do in Xero in order to process a lost receipt. So we're going to assume you've got bank feeds set up. If you haven't got bank feeds set up, have a word with yourself, go away and look into that. But ultimately what you will see is things like this. We're going to assume that Cooper Street Bakery is the place that Mark's, entertained his client, and we can see there are actually multiple instances of this on the bank account. So Mark had one lump sum, but let's just assume that that it's these people here. So we can see that these items up here for Ridgeway have gone green, and Truxton Property have gone green because they've matched themselves against a transaction in Xero. That is never going to happen for Mark and his Cooper Street Bakery because he doesn't have a receipt. It hasn't been processed in the system, so it needs to be processed some way. Now, in order to get rid of something like this, obviously, we need to create a transaction. There isn't anything to match this document against. So we're simply going to say who. So Cooper Street Bakery, it came up. That would imply that we have this contact in the ledger already, and we've previously spent some money there. What were we doing? We were entertaining. Now you get two options in Xero Standard Chart of Accounts. A lot of people say what is 100% business and what is 0%. So just to reiterate something we've covered a moment ago, staff entertainment will be okay. So that would be your 100% business. That's telling your accountant or bookkeeper that this is okay for tax purposes. The 0% is business entertaining. We've just seen a second ago, there is no tax relief for this. So to make life easy for your accountant, it can be split out into two different account codes if you want to try and do them a favour and make sure that you're claiming correctly without them having to ask the question. So I would go with 0%. In the description, I would put meal with whoever the client was. We don't have a receipt, we don't have any information, so we need to provide as much detail as we can to make it easy for the accountant and bookkeeper to understand what was going on here and not to try and dismiss these costs. Likewise, it's your job to provide evidence to HMRC that these are bona fide business costs. So we would put that in there. I would go with something like missing receipt or lost receipt. Ultimately try and get copies of receipts where it is absolutely possible to do that. Now, coming down to the bottom, what do we do with VAT? Again, we know there is no VAT on business entertainment. We've just been through that a second ago. So even though we've got a loss receipt, you think, can I or can I not claim this VAT? There isn't any VAT to claim in this instance. Now, I'm not going to tell you whether it should be no VAT or zero rated expenses. This is one of those questions that's been going on for as long as I've been, an accountant. I tend to use zero rated expenses just so it goes on a VAT return and it doesn't appear in the no VAT pot. The no VAT pot for me should be things like manual journals and where there's generally outside the scope of VAT. Some would argue that this is outside the scope of VAT because it's not a qualified business expense, with it being no VAT and not taxable for business purposes. I'll leave you to decide that one with your accountant or bookkeeper. Then we'd hit the OK button. There you go. It's reconciled, it's disappeared. Now, what you will notice that very quickly, as soon as I've hit that OK button, because there is nothing matching against this Cooper Street Bakery one as well, Xero has very cleverly copied the information and said, hey, you used this last time, do you want me to apply the same information? Now, if that was a case that we were also missing a receipt here, then we'd say okay to that and move on. Obviously, we would try and make sure we've got the paperwork, but that's not always going to be the case. But let's try and at least get receipts and invoices where we can. We don't want missing receipts for the same suppliers over and over again, because if you do ever get a tax investigation, it's probably going to look a bit bizarre. Okay, that's how you'd process those items in Xero. So there you have it. Ultimately, if you've got client entertainment and you've lost a lost receipt doesn't mean that you can't claim for those costs. Okay, you just need to make sure that you've got as much detail as possible and evidence that it is a business expense. There is no VAT on business entertaining, so even with a lost receipt, you're not losing out on reclaiming VAT because you wouldn't be able to do that anyway. You can't claim that as a taxable cost for the business to deduct against your corporation tax bill, so it will get added back anyway, and then ultimately it's down to you to decide whether or not you're happy to put those costs through without the relevant paperwork. It's not down to your accountant or bookkeeper to dictate to you how you should be processing that. And that's it in a nutshell. That's how you would process something in Xero if you didn't have the corresponding paperwork to back it up.